Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. We have with us Susan Calloway Knowles. She's a licensed psychotherapist, an attorney, author, host of Stand for Truth, a radio show that's on WNJC, 1360 AM. And my radio station's not going to be upset about that because nobody can get that here. We're in Alaska. And Susan also has made guest appearances on the Rick Amato Show. I've been on that as well. One American News Network, and is also a political, cultural blogger. Recently put up a story entitled Democrats' War on Women and an Abortion-Focused Agenda Should Fail in 2016. Susan, welcome to the Joe Miller Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So a lot of people have said this effort of the left to characterize the Republican approach to social issues as a war on women. It's actually the reverse of it, isn't it? It's the Democrats that are doing it.
Absolutely. And it seems to really work for them. It worked back in 2012. They came out with this war on women, and it seemed to have a huge impact on voters. It didn't work so well in 2014, and now we're faced with what's going to happen in 2016.
Well, you know, there was a poll that just came out. We put this up on RestoringLiberty.com yesterday that shows that the left is actually increasing in strength in the United States. It's a Gallup poll. I don't really trust the polls that much, but Gallup does a pretty good job. It suggests that the number of self-described liberals increasing, significant increase in those characterizing themselves as social liberals, and this is over a time frame of the last 4 years. Of course, that could spell big dividends to the Democrats that are pushing these topics, right?
Well, absolutely. And somebody, I think it was Steven Crowder, who recently went out and started talking to people about, what do you want to see in the next election? And almost without fail, we would talk to women, they would say, we want Hillary Clinton. And why? Because she's a female. And that was it. So we're not really as much interested, it seems, at least with what he was doing, in looking for a candidate that really represents our values and what we as the majority of Americans want. But now we just want a female.
Doug Ross put up, we put this up on RestoringLiberty.com. It's a Clinton scandal tracker. And it has by the day every new scandal that comes out. And, of course, Hillary's just as dirty as Bill. Maybe she's not out there, engaged in all the sexual dalliances that Bill was, but she is just as capable and as likely to commit, these gray area moral violations as what Bill was. And it seems like every week something new comes out. And, on the right, we hear this we're all aware of all these things she's done, from destroying emails to including her own server to going out there and doing things to make sure that the public doesn't hear the truth about Benghazi and all of these other different things that she's had her hand in. We don't even have to get back 20 or 30 years. We can just focus on current contemporary scandals. And it's like, how could anybody elect such a dirty individual to the White House? But there is this vested core, like you said, and I guess, maybe it is. Maybe they just want a female in office. Do you think that means the Republicans need to get busy to make sure that they push forward a female candidate, or do you think that's necessary?
I think what the Republicans need to do is, once and for all, figure out what the American people want. Start listening to the American people again. They've gone off course. In 1980, Ronald Reagan was the last president that really campaigned on the issue of abortion. And this was during the time right after Roe versus Wade in 1973. And here comes Ronald Reagan in 1980 saying, abortion is wrong and most Americans don't want abortion, and on and on and on. We haven't had somebody who's willing to have their conviction and stand up and really talk about what's important to the majority of Americans. The Republicans seem of late to just kind of listen to what they think the public wants, and they just kind of go back and forth and vacillate. We don't need that. We need leaders.
Yeah, in fact, the Republican Party is running from the social issues. The leadership, they'd like this gay marriage decision to be over. They want it to become the law of the land. They want it to be buried 6 feet under. And it's the same way on the life issue. And one of the things I've said for a long time, I think that these issues on family, these issues that are important to the social fabric of the country, The Republican Party likes to every once in a while say something about them, but the reality of it, the leadership runs far away when it comes to actual practical impact on what the country actually experiences in those issues. I mean, one of the reasons that abortion's still legal today is because of Republicans. I mean, look at the composition of the Supreme Court. There have been several opportunities. I mean, starting with the appointment of Sandra Day O'Connor. Bless Reagan's heart. I love the guy as president, but that was a mistake. I mean, her vote was decisive in keeping abortion legal. And we don't really, as a constituency, demand of our leadership what's necessary to make them go out and speak truth. But I think that, you know, like you've indicated, that if some of these candidates go out there and start doing it, the support will come, despite the fact that that hasn't been the track record of the party.
Well, and so far, I think the only candidate that's really willing to do that I've seen is Scott Walker, who basically recently indicated that he's going to, he would sign a 20-week abortion bill without rape or incest exception. I mean, that's pretty bold for a candidate to do. I don't think that's been done. I don't see anybody else coming out and talking about that.
I know Rand Paul hasn't. What about Ted Cruz on that? I've not heard him confronted on the exception issues.
I think so far, the questions have been in regards to marriage, and they're really not talking to the candidates yet about how they feel about abortion.
That's certainly one way for Scott Walker to separate. I mean, a lot of people don't know who Scott Walker is, and it's a brilliant move on his part. Hopefully that's really his genuine view on it. We've had Rebecca Kiesling on this program, and I've interacted with her personally a number of different times. She's a survivor of rape. In other words, her mom was raped. That's how she was conceived. Her mom has said repeatedly that if abortion were allowed at the time, she would have aborted Rebecca. Rebecca, of course, brilliant attorney, public speaker, but she's talked about how she's had impact on Rick Perry. I mean, Rick Perry gave her a personal commitment that, in fact, he would fight any exceptions. I don't know where he's at publicly now as a presidential candidate, but I wasn't aware of Scott Walker's stand on that. And that certainly, given the fact that he's not real well known in the social conservative circles, may help gain him some support out of that constituency.
Well, and I think it's really important for people to start seeing where all of this is coming from. I had a guest on my show last night who'd written a book about how the progressive Marxist communists, if you will, want to take down marriage and family. They want to destroy it. And this isn't a new concept. This has been going on for about 200 years. And if you read the history of what these people do, they go after marriage. They are very much pro-abortion, as Margaret Sanger was, as you might recall her, and others of just like her, Bernadine Dohrn, one of them. And they're also they want to attack marriage by saying marriage is not between a man and a woman. And this is the way to just utterly destroy the traditions of America and marriage and take America down. And they're really good at it. They've been doing it for a long time, and they will continue to do it.
They will, and I think we're getting ready to come up on break, but this issue on marriage and now transgenderism and all this other garbage that's out there, it's stimulated in the right, for the first time, real outspokenness. I mean, I know we've been hitting the issue nonstop on this program because people understand that there's now going to be real impacts on free exercise and other things as a result of this war against traditional values. We'll talk more about that with Susan Calloway Knowles, licensed psychotherapist, attorney, host of Stand for Truth, after these messages on The Joe Miller Show. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Joe Miller Show, KON Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. We have with us Susan Calloway Knowles. She's a licensed psychotherapist, a former practicing family law attorney, host of Stand for Truth, a radio show on WNJC 1360 AM out of Philadelphia. Made guest appearances on a number of different shows throughout the country. Articulate, freedom fighter on the airways, and very concerned about the direction of the country. She has a website, SusanKnowles.com. Susan, thanks for staying with us for another segment.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
So we're talking about the article that we'll have up on RestoringLiberty.com hopefully tonight, Democrats' War on Women and an Abortion-Focused Agenda. should fail in 2016. Hillary Clinton et al. On the left have used this alleged war on women to some success. There's polling that shows that the left, that's numbers in the United States, increasing. But one of the bright spots in this whole thing, when you look at the efforts that the pro-life movement in America has made to educate Americans on life, it seems to me that this may be another area where the left is going in the wrong direction and they may actually lose support. What say you?
Well, what is so good and what gives us a ray of hope is that the issue that they're trying to use, the war on women, with their abortion issue, abortions are actually down, and they've declined since 2010. They're down about 12 to 15%, and that's really good news. And they're even down in states that are very liberal. So it's even better for us to hear that. And one of the things that they think is happening, the pro-life groups think that there's becoming a societal change in attitude. Because a lot of times if they have a sonogram and they see the baby and actually have informed consent, they choose not to have an abortion. And that informed is the word there.
Right.
The people on pro-choice, they don't want you to have all of the facts. They just want you to go ahead and have the abortion without the facts.
Right. And I think that's had a huge impact. Of course, technology too. It's not just the ultrasound that our spouses maybe, or my wife saw when she had her last child, but these things, they bring the imagery up front, close and personal. And if people see that, it's very, very difficult to make the decision that the left wants them to make. In many cases, a lot of the population control advocates and others that, keep their support network alive. One of the things that Steven Crowder, of course, he guest hosts for me on Friday. He has talked to the youth about their attitudes on life and has detected, again, what some of this polling has shown, and that is that even though they may be going the wrong direction on a whole host of other areas, this is a place where the American population seems to be getting it. It's a bright spot, and it just seems that with the left's continued focus on abortion on demand, this idea that this is a wedge issue, I just don't see how they're going to. I guess they've got a hardcore 30% or something like that may encourage them to get out of their lazy chairs and vote. But for the most part, I don't see the margins impacted by that. Do you?
No, I think what all of this kind of says to us is that we really need to be wary of what we hear in the news. What the Democrats say, let's for example, that women want isn't always what women really want. And we have to do our own homework. We have to be diligent about looking into things and finding out what the truth is before we just kind of go along with it, because to do otherwise would mean that we're intolerant or we're not politically correct or whatever the word is of the day that keeps us from, freely expressing ourselves in our First Amendment. So we really just need to, do our own homework and be diligent.
Well, and I think also there needs to be leadership shown. A lot of times, at least what we've seen over the last several decades is this tendency of candidates to put their finger up in the air and go whichever direction they felt the winds were blowing. I think that's part of what the motivation of the Republican Party leadership on the whole issue of traditional marriage. They see that the winds of change are going the opposite direction. They don't want anything to do with providing leadership on an issue that really goes down to the core health of the country. And one of the example, perhaps, not necessarily of leadership on an issue, but of being kind of counter the message is this issue of earnings. There's another push, for equal earnings between men and women. Steven Crowder put up a pretty funny video about this several weeks ago, but basically suggesting that what we have currently in society is inequities. And of course, you're going to see this exploited, no doubt, by if Hillary's the nominee in an effort to drive more folk in support. But when you strip it all down and you determine exactly what causes these differentials in earning capacity, you find that a lot of it has to do with family choices, not discrimination in the workplace or discriminatory compensation practices.
Well, absolutely right. But that won't matter to the progressives that are pushing their agenda on the Democrat side. Hillary's already geared up and out there in her speech in North Carolina recently saying too many women still earn less than men on the job, when she knows, as she's saying the speech, that when she was in the U.S. Senate as the Secretary of State, she was paying women less. And so you're going to see this addition to the war on women in 2016. Prepare yourself, because it's going to be now in 2016 that not only are Republicans denying women their right to an abortion, but they are also causing the women's economic decline and hurting the family. So it's basically taking everything, this hypocrisy from the left is going to now be placed on Republicans. And, I got to tell you, I want to see what the Republicans are going to do with that. They have to stand up. They have to go into debates with this information, armed with this information, and saying, absolutely not, and here's why.
Well, in fact, you mentioned in the last segment that there's one candidate that's taking a pretty strong stance, Scott Walker. Apparently the only one out there that I've heard say that actually against any exceptions, a complete ban on abortion without rape and incest exceptions. Is he indicating strong social conservative credentials in any other area, or is it just on the life issue that he's taken such a strong stand?
Well, I think that he, economically and all that he's done for his state has been, it's kind of like almost like a Texas type dream come true. He's really helped a lot in that area. I don't know about other areas that he's involved with yet. I don't know him as well as a candidate. I really don't know a lot of them yet. I know who they are, is who they say they are, but I don't know who, when they come out as candidates, if it's going to be the same person that I'm hearing. So I'm kind of at a wait and see on all of these people.
Well, and that's a good thing to do. I mentioned last segment too, Rick Perry, of course. Rebecca Kiesling talks about the interaction, and this has been public. This is not just a conversation with Joe Miller. She talked about how she convinced him to make a stand on this issue, and we'll wait and see whether or not that becomes an official policy decision for his campaign. It's interesting because the way that this field is developing with so many candidates, many of them tend to be more conservative, only a couple of establishment candidates in there, that I think the way this goes down is it's going to be a rush to the right. So I don't think people are going to be shying away from these issues, to be honest, as this develops.
No, I don't think so either. And I think, but what is kind of scary right now is that, we have a candidate, Hillary Clinton, who is basically, everything that you can think of that she has done is being exposed. And still, this person is, popular. People still want her. It's as though that everything is coming out in the news no one is listening to. So, we need to do something about that. As the Republicans really need to get in there. If she happens to be the candidate, there needs to be an actual debate, not something that we saw with Romney and Obama, where Romney came out strong in the first debate, and everybody was like, "Wow, finally!" And then somebody talked to him.
I couldn't agree more with you, Susan. And things continue the way they're going with the conservatives splintered. Somebody like Bush, with the money he's raising, probably going to come out on top, and it's going to be another one of those Romney-Obama matchups. And then it's anybody's guess what happens in a dynastic-type struggle that I think Americans are sick of. Maybe there will be a third-party candidate come up. Who knows? But, Susan, I appreciate your insights. Appreciate what you're doing with your radio show. Keep up the good work with the blog, SusanKnowles.com. And, Susan, thank you again for being on the Joe Miller Show.
I really enjoyed it.
Stay with us. We'll be back with you after these messages.